The Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Blockchain Super Conference is coming to Dallas, Texas, February 16, 17, and 18 in 2018. If you know of a better way to get the latest insider knowledge about crypto, to hear directly from the top minds in this field, to interact personally with 800 fellow crypto lovers, hodlers, investors, miners, traders, developers, and founders, then I'd like to hear about it. If you don't, then you don't want to miss out. Register today for the Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Blockchain Super Conference. Go to bitcoinsuperconference.com and register today as a super early bird to get the lowest rates on tickets and hotel rooms. That's bitcoinsuperconference.com.
Welcome to Almost Here, Round the Corner Future Technology podcast with Richard Jacobs. Future technologies poised to transform our lives for better or worse are the focus of this podcast. Almost Here means these technologies are now here and starting to be used, or just around the corner, from Bitcoin to artificial intelligence, 3D printing, blockchain, virtual reality, and more.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with Future Tech Podcast. My guest today is from a company called Treeline, or Treeline Interactive. It's Jake Fields, founder and CEO. Jake, how you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Jake, so let's start off with the basics. What does Treeline do?
Treeline is a software development shop that has been focused on emerging technologies, I guess, for the past 12 or 13 years now. So we've been in a number of different fields as we've kind of evolved, but it's kind of a hybrid of professional services and also product incubation. So we work with a number of different clients to help solve specific problems they have, and we come into their organization, help augment their resources, build out different product technologies, or there's additional products that over time we've started to develop and then spin out into their own organizations to help kind of solve recurring problems that we're seeing within the field and different emerging opportunities.
So what's some examples of your top software projects? What were they about?
So we do a lot of stuff across entertainment, medical, even into a lot of kind of the startup realm. But in the past, we had started out in the action sports world. So we've done a lot of work that helped deal with, work with, I guess, the X Games and also a lot of different ski resorts. So that's kind of where we started. That evolved a bit into events. And then more recently, we've been solving kind of more connected device IoT type problems. So one example in the medical field, we were working with West Health, who's here in San Diego, and they were looking to implement a wireless fetal ultrasound monitor. So we were able to help them work through the product prototype and build out phase, and also build out the mobile technology to connect it, and then build the web and cloud infrastructure to be able to manage that data. So that's something that we were able to do kind of on an external basis. Example from an internal product side of things is a transportation logistics platform that we put together more recently that deals with connecting the supply chain and also, interactivity of drivers and how they work with their vehicles. And then that's also played over a little bit into some of the work we've done in the IoT realm, be able to connect, industrial manufacturing type devices to the internet. So as you can see, it's a variety of stuff, but I think connectivity sensors is really a common thread there. And then a lot of the additional data that gets augmented on top of user input.
Yeah, so what's new with connectivity? It's going to be IoT devices all connected, and are they going to include algorithms to analyze what each device is doing or to optimize the system?
Yeah, I think everybody's pushing to be, the central hub, whether you look at, the home and the consumer side of things, which I think is a tricky market, I think, for new products, but, some people are getting some real traction there. Or even if you look at business and, industrial automation, people are trying to figure out how do you bring all these devices together to speak a common language. There's a lot of system integration that needs to ultimately happen on the back end. Not everything is going to be speaking the same wireless protocol to come together. So you need to really have a strong back office configuration that is open to receiving the data sets that's going to get across the board. And I think that's something in the past that was challenging for organizations. Even a lot of the organizations that got a little bit of a leg up and, early, some of that being transportation, banking, even things like casinos, they were using technology early and actually ended up handcuffing them and tying their hands a little bit longer term because their systems are so old, they weren't really architected to deal with all these different types of data that they would need to integrate with. So I think they're in the process of solving that, but it's really just a matter of, iteration. And now everybody's kind of taking that future forward approach of having external data sources, APIs, and, a centralized data store to be able to run analytics on. I mean, I think the next real step is for everybody to be operating in real time. That comes with its own host of challenges, but real time is that next opportunity, which allows you to then move into predictive, which solves problems that are coming down the pipe in the future.
So what industries do you think are in most need of better connectivity and real-time data analysis?
I think where we've seen it, just based on our experience, I'm sure there's plenty of other, has been this kind of manufacturing world and the transportation realm. There's a lot of things that are happening. If you take a look just at the manufacturing side of things, you have equipment that's operating in the field. Some of that equipment stays there for, 20, 30 years because it's an industrial device that serves that, specific function. But those need to be maintained and kind of reviewed on a regular basis. And you can't have a kind of advanced replacement type guy out there every single week to understand if, the bearings are wobbling on a, some sort of rotator pump. But at the same time, you can go ahead and implement sensors that phone home so you can understand when issues may happen or are going to happen in the future. Some of this allows you to prevent downtime. And if you're doing, a run on some pharmaceutical drugs or whatever they might be that you're using a pump for a clean room, you may lose, $20, $30, $50,000 easily just by, the downtime on that equipment. And that's without just lost work availability in the future. That's purely that run that may fail. So all those things are areas where the threshold, within the margins and the business operations are going to continue to reduce so that people will need to understand what their equipment is going to do in advance. And it won't be acceptable to have any types of failures and downtimes, at least, as we get a little bit ways out here.
How automated are the most critical industries right now? Are they pretty far along, or are they in the Stone Age? Or?
I can't speak to all the industries. If you take a look at something like power plants and, some pretty advanced turbines, they've gotten to the point where they understand they don't have those margins for error. But as you go down the supply chain and even just the industrial chain a little bit further, I mean, virtually nothing is monitored. I mean, you're probably talking about, single-digit percentages, which, you don't necessarily need to hit 100%, but there's probably at least, 40 to 50% of your critical infrastructure that you need to make sure that you keep online and be able to do so without, having humans go ahead and touch everything every single day. So I think that's where there's the big opportunity, and it's a pretty expansive space as you take a look at all the different realms of manufacturing and industry that start to get involved and even pan out into wastewater and other things that deal with, the smart city, which is, a whole other machine of its own.
So what do you think is realistic in the next 5 or 10 years in terms of IoT, and what industries and where will people see it versus, what's way off in the future?
I mean, I think it always feels like you're right about there, but it does seem like we're at a pretty interesting tipping point where, IoT has come in. It's been the golden child of explosion, and there's going to be billions and billions of connected devices, trillions. But it didn't quite take stride as quickly as people would have thought. You got the connected devices for consumers. We got some for industry that started to come together and kind of paint the vision, but a lot of it's been case studies. A lot of it's been companies that are testing things out. I think there's enough data out there now. I think costs of, microcomputing and even battery power and, cellular connectivity have all been driven down. So the next 5 years, I think, is going to be pretty exciting to see that really start to hockey stick up, especially as these companies can prove actual ROI and use these technologies as a competitive advantage versus, a hobby or an interest or an R&D project. And I think that'll allow some of these industries also or force them to consolidate further as you end up with a couple lead players that really run a streamlined operation. The other folks that don't adapt won't be able to compete. So, those kind of roll those companies up, and you'll end up with a, slightly different landscape. At the same time, we'll be doing IoT, and then we'll have self-driving vehicles and flying cars and all that. But, I think those ones are going to be a slightly longer timeline than the direct impact that IoT can make right now within these spaces.
Well, connectivity is coming. What about security? I mean, that's going to be a huge factor, I would think. How's that going to be addressed?
Yeah, I mean, the security side is, quite frankly, really scary, just based on, recent incidents we've seen. I think that goes beyond IoT and any of this future tech. I think we live in an overly vulnerable digital world, and I think companies and even countries are going to need to learn how to create some better standards to make sure people don't open up, individuals or corporations to, these direct vulnerabilities. But it's going to remain a huge risk, I think, going forward, at least into the next 5 or 10 years in terms of a free and open web. I think things start to get locked down a little bit more in the future, and that starts to change shape. But nonetheless, I think on the IoT and device side of things, there's a lot of stuff that can be done and really handled through best practices. I think there's some more advanced technologies that can be then applied to help make these technologies smarter and stronger and more secure. But these devices are essentially, web servers or web nodes, and there's standards that have been developed over the past 20, 30 years that, can be directly applied, maybe with slight changes and, evolving those standards a little bit further. But people just need to not be sloppy. A lot of this is a rush to get devices out. You have a lot of devices coming quickly off the production line from China as they're mimicking other products in the States. And, there's code that gets copied and pasted and standards and pieces that are plugged in that aren't the top priority. But I do see security as a role in any sizable organization continuing to grow, whether that's product development, whether that's infrastructure, integration companies. So hopefully people kind of give it its necessary resources.
Well, how much do you have to worry about security? I mean, you're a software company. You can develop applications that can connect things, provide analytics, et cetera. But are you seeing that you have a responsibility to also include the security elements, or if you follow best practices, you're safe?
There's definitely a responsibility there, and it starts within the different layers, and it starts with how much do you expose the devices. So the easiest way to secure a device is to make sure that it's not accessible from an outside party. From there, you can go ahead and add in all different layers of security from your VPN access and your tunnels and different ways to access security protocols, encryptions. Update management has been a really recent exploit that a lot of people have taken advantage of from a connected device standpoint. It's one that just companies were rushing to be able to do over-the-air updates, and they didn't take into account the fact that that was a backdoor into their entire ecosystem. So thankfully, some people have kind of put out some, helpful code and standards beyond just best practices to be able to deal with that. A lot of the device managers, device makers, even the chip makers, they're taking on the onus of security to be able to offer up, sample code and components that allow their the companies that are using their chips to go ahead and push these steps forward. But it exists within every step of the ecosystem. So your vulnerabilities can be on the web, they can be locally within machines, and ultimately it can be as secure as possible. If you're accessing these devices, humans become probably the weakest link. So at that point, you're dealing with how do you make sure that it's not just standard password management where you can end up with social engineering exploits. So it'll never be perfect, but on our side of things, we just make sure each phase of the project and each component that may be talking to the outside world, has the ability to be addressed from a security monitoring and implementation standpoint.
So what projects do you have coming that you're most excited about, what that you can reveal that are not proprietary?
Yeah, it's a little bit tricky. A lot of the stuff we do is kind of in an R&D and pre-commercialization realm, and then as we put things out in market. But I would say, there's some stuff that we're doing that's pretty awesome in the healthcare space that allows kind of some more of the archaic systems for managing, patient prescription and benefit information to kind of take the next step forward. The stuff that we're doing in the transportation realm is, really exciting to me because as you deal with vehicles, that's kind of your ultimate connected device. It has tons of data that's throwing off. It's huge in size, and everybody grows up, or all guys grow up playing with trucks. There's these trucks are now real world items that are working with the infrastructure of the United States to deliver commerce and goods. So it's also another area where there's a ton of room for optimization. As you take a look at, the trillions of dollars in supply chain, there's plenty of inefficiencies at each stop along the delivery cycle. So addressing it just from a vehicle standpoint for starters is interesting, but you start to touch other components of, warehousing and distribution facilities. You take a look at ports, all these are areas where, they're just begging for opportunities for better technology and, more transparency to be able to, get the goods through those destinations faster.
All right. Any other projects that you can comment on?
Yeah, I think there's some additional work that we're doing right now with ESPN that, we've worked with them in the X Games and a lot of athlete work in the past to be able to, manage those athletes and a lot of data and information. But, they're starting to push things into the next realm of connected device. They worked with Intel, their Curie chip, to be able to do real-time athlete monitoring last year to collect these specific data sets. So between those data sets, the recorded results, anything that's captured through computer vision, you end up with these pretty expansive sets of information about athletes across multiple different sports and competitions. It's another example where you have, too much data to be able to do anything with. So we're putting together some back-end systems to be able to really take that data to the next step, to take a look at, what are predictive results, what's different notable information that could be reported about the past, and how is that most relevant to broadcast and, the spectators in the future. So taking a whole other realm of, performance data out of machines and really applying it to humans and understanding how that can be then further applied, I guess, for entertainment and, in a space that really has a bigger opportunity to expand beyond where it's at now.
Any, since you not only see data, but you set up the networks that handle vast amounts of data, any surprises you see from all this integration and connectivity work? Unanticipated good or bad consequences for these companies?
I think whenever you're dealing with mobile connectivity, there's a score of nightmares that you deal with, and you work through those challenges, and you understand how to, have redundancy. You understand where you need real-time data or not. You definitely, again, run into a lot of these legacy systems, and I think there's a great, second renaissance of, information technology happening right now, where these legacy systems, have been augmented to the level of, dwarfing them within the overall infrastructure, and they're ready to rip out those pieces and put in new cores. So that's really exciting, so that you can really have that infrastructure to keep things connected. And the other thing is, understanding that connectivity, understanding both the fidelity and the reliability of that data. So it's one thing just to have a single piece of information delivered, but as you deal with time series data and streams of information, understanding how to deal with that capacity, and then also how to then mash up that data with other streams of information to get, actual meaningful results versus just exponentially more data that's being archived. So that's both exciting and a big challenge that we've seen and tried to help, some different organizations navigate. So stream processing has definitely been a nice computing direction to help deal with that. But there's a ton of other ones as we deal with kind of big data and, larger application processing or multi-tenant processing.
You think a lot of these companies maybe are just excited about getting big data, but then they'll just sit on it and do nothing with it? How do you get something connected? How do you get people to use it and benefit from it? It seems like a lot of the systems may be left in the wrapping and never used,
Yeah, it depends on the organization. You can start collecting data, which is nice, and you can eventually figure out what to do to it. If you're really driving home a new initiative, it's nice to approach it strategically like you would with anything else. And, what is your hypothesis? What are you looking to prove? What do you think the value outcomes may be? And, what's the minimum viable product to go ahead and prove that may or may not be actually valuable. So implementing that through kind of a prototype pre-commercialization phase is something that a lot of companies are doing. Because, really all the data in the world is great, but it doesn't do anything good for the organization. It ultimately is going to get cut out, and someone's going to figure out a better way to do things. So, that's starting at the end, right? What's your conclusion? Where do you want to get to? And then working backwards and figuring out how to get there is really the only way to do it properly. Unless you just understand that you're collecting test data that at some point is going to be processed and utilized. And that's more of a, shotgun type approach.
All right. So last question in this vein, what do you think is more fantasy than reality over the next 5 or 10 years? What's like the dream of connectivity that you think we're just not going to be able to get there yet for quite a while?
that's an interesting one. Okay. Fantasy then reality. I think there's going to be some great improvements in the AI realm, but I think that's going to take a little bit longer than we'd like to actually truly become intelligent. I think that the problem with a lot of these technologies is you start to whet people's appetite, and then their expectations grow and grow and grow. And right now, you have some pretty interesting AI systems that are going on, but people want, a virtual assistant that's perfect, that answers all their hopes and desires and needs. And it's interesting, services are augmenting that with humans to help bridge the gaps. But I think ultimately, to get to a true level of a, smart virtual assistant, it's going to be a few years further out than I think people would expect, and you start to hit a wall in terms of, some of the data sets that are available and available on demand. I think Alexa really surprised people and came out the gates and was very performant, but you could see the problems and the challenges that Apple already has with Siri and really getting that to the next level. And then you combine in different privacy concerns and, at what point is, all the data open, or at what point does that data need to be protected? So I think that's definitely one area. I don't know when the flying cars are coming. I like the prospect of Hyperloop. I wish that could be accelerated a little bit further, but I don't know. It's kind of up to the future.
Well, very good. Well, how can people find out more about Treeline and start interacting with you?
Yeah, so you go ahead and visit treelineinteractive.com, and we're based down here in San Diego, but, we work with people throughout the country and throughout the world. And, if there's something in the IoT, connected device world, even, web application realm, happy to chat and figure out where we might be able to take it.
The Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Blockchain Super Conference is coming to Dallas, Texas, February 16, 17, and 18 in 2018. If you know of a better way to get the latest insider knowledge about crypto, to hear directly from the top minds in this field, to interact personally with 800 fellow crypto lovers, hodlers, investors, miners, traders, developers, and founders, then I'd like to hear about it. If you don't, then you don't want to miss out. Register today for the Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Blockchain Super Conference. Go to bitcoinsuperconference.com and register today as a super early bird to get the lowest rates on tickets and hotel rooms. That's bitcoinsuperconference.com.
You have been listening to Almost Here, Around the Corner Future Technology podcast with Richard Jacobs. Subscribe to this podcast, post a review to discover more future technologies that are poised to transform our lives for better or worse, such as Bitcoin, artificial intelligence, 3D printing, blockchain, virtual reality, and more.